Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here in my wormery and I got a couple worm bins I plan to feed. Usually I'm wearing a blue surgical glove to cover up my left hand so I can, use that to work with and keep my other hand clean and free, and no glove just so I can manipulate the camera and do other things that, I need to do without getting things dirty. And I'm out of my blue gloves, so I'm going to try something new today. I'm going to see how clumsy I am as a result of taking this trial. These are just your typical dishwashing gloves. So I went in underneath the kitchen sink and found a couple. I think I've even got a couple other pairs back there. So there's a whole bunch of these down under the kitchen sink. I have no idea how old these are. They've probably been sitting down there for ages. They could just tear as soon as I put my hand inside of one of them, but I'm going to go ahead and figure out which of these is the left glove. I'm not going to go too crazy picking and choosing. I'm just going to slip it on and get to work. Definitely curious to see how this goes. Oh my goodness. This glove must be designed for somebody with tiny hands. Or maybe it's this way by design to make sure that it fits snugly. I thought it was going to be really loose and kind of clumsy, but it does feel like it's a pretty good fit. It's definitely got a larger gauntlet on it that covers more of my forearm than the blue surgical gloves do. So we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna go get the first of the bins out here on the bench and we'll get to work. We're starting today with the younger of the bins, the 50-day-old bin. Roman numeral L, right? And the other notable thing about the launch day of this bin, which was 50 days ago, is that 50 days ago I started a streak of putting a video onto the channel every single day without missing a day. Some days we even had 2 videos go up online, but the day that this bin was launched was the beginning of the 50-day streak, and today, assuming I make it to the video editor and manage to get this video online, today will be 50 days in a row where a new video has gone on my channel every single day. So it's kind of like a marathon run for me. I've never I've never done that many videos, or that many days without skipping a day. And it wasn't easy. I went away a couple weekends. It was Easter. There was a whole lot of reasons I could have certainly missed a day along the way, but I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to maintain that streak. I just thought I would keep pushing myself to see, how far I could take it. But here's a couple of stats on what we're dealing with here today. So the bin here is 50 days old, the one right here on the bench. We'll feed the 95-day-old bin next. In both cases, it's been 10 days since they were last fed. And in both cases, each bin has an estimated population of about 2,000 worms in it. And then, you can see how many times each bin has been fed over its lifespan. So I came down here prepared with some food items, pretty much an ordinary feeding. Not a lot going on today. It's just your kind of run-of-the-mill feeding. Kitchen scraps, a lot of veggies and fruit scraps, and some coffee, as well as some coffee filters that we're going to include as bedding to go along with the feeding. Let's see what we got. So as the temperature warms up, since we're in springtime now, the heat in my house is turning on less and less. And in my house I've got forced hot air, and I believe that contributes a lot to the dryness of the air in the wintertime. So I think as time goes on, the more humid air is going to start taking over. It's going to be less and less dryness. And with less dry air, I think that the worm bins are going to be capable of holding on to their moisture a lot better on their own without the help of plastic coverings, or at least covering as thoroughly as I normally do. So I'm going to be pretty attentive over the coming weeks as we transition from, the heat running all the time to the heat hardly running at all, to make sure that I'm not allowing my bins to get overly damp. So I'm wondering how things look in here. We had fed right down the middle the last time we were in here. From what I remember, it was a pretty generous feeding, but for a bin that's got 2,000 worms in it, they do need to eat. That's a weird pit sort of a thing, and I remember encountering this a number of times in the past, never being able to break it that way, but now it fell apart pretty easily. I'm not going to break it up any further because it is an interesting thing that I don't remember what it was. So it's true that I bring some food scraps over from my mom's house, but you know, her tastes and diet are not so different from mine, so I'm not going to find all kinds of weird exotic stuff in her kitchen scraps that she donates to the wormery. I usually assume that I'm going to be able to identify most of the things that I'm giving to the worms, but it may not be the case in every instance. So I do remember I added a pretty good amount of grit last time I fed. So I was preparing to process a whole huge collection of eggshell that I had been collecting for some time. So I just wanted to deplete my previous, supply that I was still trying to do away with to make room for the new batch. So since we were pretty generous with the grit last time, I wasn't really planning on adding grit this go around, and it does seem like down here within the area where we last fed, there's still signs of a good amount of it being in here. I like the consistency of the material. It feels nice and cool and damp all the way through, but it doesn't feel muddy, not by any means. It's got a good amount of bedding mixed into it as well. And I guess for a 50-day-old bin, it kind of makes sense. I do use a lot of leaves when I build my bins, a lot of leaves from outside as bedding. So to find a lot of these leaf stems is a normal thing in most of my younger bins, but I do shy away from using the leaves in my older bins because I don't want to be left with castings that are littered with, a lot of this stuff. So this stuff will definitely break down in time. The worms do away with the soft, leafy portion of the leaf pretty quickly, and then over time they eventually work down the stems too. So the feeding went down the middle last time. As we sort of till around and inspect how things are looking, we're now in the area where the last feeding occurred. So here we're going to start seeing some remnants of the previous feeding. Let's check out how it's holding up to 10 days of worms trying to dig through it. I added a number of torn up coffee filters at that time too. So we're going to find a good amount of bedding in here. And I'm going to go ahead and be pretty generous with the bedding again, because I'm trying to, change my evil ways. A lot of people often comment that my bins need more bedding, and I totally agree. So I'm making an effort to provide my worms with more bedding when I feed, more than I have in the past at least. So I believe I'm not even sure, another banana peel maybe? The stem of a banana peel. This is also like the butt end of some sort of a vegetable. It's always kind of cool how it looks like a little bit of a starburst as they eat the more soft materials out of the middle, and the more woody, tough portions remain for the end. But as you can see, the worms definitely dig it. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of leftovers. I'm finding, bits and pieces of bedding. A couple things that do take a little bit longer typically to break down, like the banana peels. But it does seem like we're back to this bin in an opportune time frame to give them more food. I wouldn't want to withhold the next feeding just because I'm finding food scraps. I know that over time certain things will break down, some of the more tough items like those banana stems. More bedding. Like I said, I was pretty generous with the bedding last time, and I plan to be generous with it again this time too. I guess I'm just curious to see, how it's holding up. I don't expect much of it to be gone, or any of it to be gone at this point. The bedding will always take a little bit longer too to break down, especially if the worms have all kinds of delicious other easy to eat foods right there alongside of it. This is one of those things that, you know, don't hold your breath, right? A peach pit, that's not going to go anywhere anytime soon. I've got a few peach pits and plum pits in a few of my bins. I'm trying to see how long it takes for them to break down. And I've just got this funny feeling that when it comes time to harvest the castings from this system and move the worms onto new environments, those pits are just going to end up going with the worms to their new home. Because I don't think one complete life cycle of a bin like this is enough time to see a tough item like a pit or whatever get broken down. That's not true for all types of pits though, you know. Some other types of pits that you think might take forever, like an avocado pit, actually does soften up and break apart, just like that first object that we couldn't identify in the beginning. Whatever that was, but I believe that was a pit as well from something. And that's pretty much what happens too to an avocado pit. Eventually it softens up, it breaks apart, and then it gets consumed. But you know, these peach pits seem to be a lot tougher. All right, so I mean, I could probably keep picking through here and finding more and more stuff to check out, but I think I've satisfied my curiosity. I think it is time to go ahead and drop in today's portion. I'm going to take the food in little portions like this and plop them in with a coffee filter. I've got a good number of these coffee filters here, so I'm looking to do away with them. So I just figured I'd combine a kind of a scarce quantity of fruits and veggies with each one and see if I can maybe do away with 3 in each bin. What do I have left? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 left. So yeah, if we give each bin 3, and this is the younger one, right? So why don't we assume that this one has ample time to do away with a little more bedding. We'll give this one a 4th chunk of paper. So yeah, lots and lots of bedding, and all this other bedding that was from previous feedings right on top. But you know what? Before we go crazy covering things up, I've still got the coffee too that I want to add, right? Let's put a peach pit down in there as well. So we'll drop in the coffee too. We'll give them about half and save the other half for the other system we're feeding. Okay. And then we could begin returning some of this remaining junk that we pulled out of the feeding area. I believe most of it's just bedding at this point, paper. Oh, this might be a banana peel. But I think that pretty much accounts for everything we plucked out of the feeding area. Hopefully that leaves us with enough stuff to cover up with here. Maybe we'll plow on this other opposite end, which we didn't really get a chance to check out too much. Here we got a good number of worms hanging out. Almost seems like more on this side than we saw on the other edge. It's a pretty cool bin. There's a good number of worms in here. I believe that estimate of about 2,000 seems realistic. And within the span of about 50 days, you know, there may have been sufficient time for a number of worms to have already mated and for their cocoons to have hatched. So, you know, I mean, all I got to do is just look down into the bin, and I'm not sure if the camera's always able to capture it or not, but, you know, I do see cocoons here and there. You know, I've got it right here on the tip of my finger, if you could see it. And I, in the past, I didn't always really go too much out of my way to try spotting cocoons, but eventually your eye sort of gets trained to recognize them and to see them a little bit more easily. In the beginning, I just felt like I was not having any cocoons in my systems, and I believe it was just because I, you know, hadn't really trained my eyes to identify them, to see them. Now that I know what I'm looking for, I mean, it seems like they're all over the place. There's one. There's another one. So, I mean, nowadays it just seems like now that I know what I'm looking for, I see them all over the place. So yeah, pretty cool. I like what I'm seeing here. I got these pieces of paper that we were covering up with previously. One of them was pretty shot. This one right here was pretty shot, so we'll see how we can make use of it perhaps one last time before we just use it as bedding down within the feeding area. But for now, it seems like it's still holding up well enough to use it as sort of a top covering. And since the moisture level in here doesn't seem too drastic, I'm going to go ahead and return the plastic covering just the way we found it. You know what? I've got a few other scraps of paper here. This was how I started my pepper seeds. I, put them into a little piece of paper, a damp piece of paper, and placed that inside of a Ziploc bag. That's how I was germinating my pepper seeds for my garden. A lot of those peppers are pretty nice in size now. These are the paper bits that I used to do that with. And some of these seeds that you see here just never germinated. Oh well. But yeah, this is a pretty nice looking bin, I must say. A lot of times I'll try to mark where I last fed using a coffee filter or something along those lines. I'm not religious about it. This time I guess we just don't have that going on here. No big deal. Sometimes I just do it for the sake of tradition. Other times I don't pay that much attention. Okay, let's move on to the 95-day-old bin. This is a slightly larger container. The worm population in here, they're a slightly different combination of worms, basically. The other bin that we just fed was what I believe to be exclusively red wigglers. But I received this batch of worms from another worm farmer in exchange for some of my own worms. Here you can see where I'm marking the feeding area with an old coffee filter, which I don't think is going to hold up to being used this way one more time, so we'll just use it as bedding, I think. But he told me that he believes that this is a mix of not just red wigglers, but Euros. And since I know he bought the red wigglers from Uncle Jim's worm farm, I believe there's probably a good number of blue worms mixed in here too. So this is just a kind of a mishmash, a melting pot of different worm types. And at 95 days of age, I would typically be reluctant to use lots and lots of bedding. So I really want to see the bedding in my bins get broken down by the time it comes time to harvest a bin. And for that reason, I definitely don't want to use leaves, because then I'll be stuck with all these stems. But you could see in this bin they're breaking down a little bit better. You can still see a good number of them, but soon you won't be able to make them out anymore. This thing is a pine cone. It's one of the weird things I've got going on in this bin. Besides the pine cone, I've also got beach towel. Terry cloth, basically, right? So beach towel is basically 100% cotton terry cloth fabric. And I've never tried composting fabrics before, so this is actually my first try at it. And previously, I had always been so careful not to disturb the contents of this bin, because when I originally built it with the pine cones and the towel, I had laid the towel in such a way that if I did try to, pull it out, it would just create a huge mess everywhere. It was sort of sprawled out all around the bin. The last time we were in here 10 days ago to feed, I did actually break from that original arrangement of materials that the bin was built with. And I collected up all the towel and the two pine cones. There is another pine cone in here somewhere. Here it is. I knew where to look for it, because I did take all those materials and I collected them all together to include them with the last feeding 10 days ago, right down the middle, so that it wouldn't be a mystery as far as where the towel and the pine cones are anymore. In the past, the pine cones were on two opposite corners. The towel was sprawled out all over the place. At this point, I've switched over to keeping the towel and the pine cones right down the middle, along with the feedings that the bin is receiving on a regular basis. Assuming that that's just where the majority of the traffic in the bin is going to be, where all the food is being placed in on a regular basis. So you can see right away we've got good strips of towel here with worms hanging out all over it. I don't know if they're just being drawn to the juices of the food that I fed with last time that has soaked into the towel, and then that's what's drawing them to the towel, or if it's the towel itself that they're actually starting to work on. But that's kind of cool to see, because in the past when I just had the towel scattered all over the bin, I never really observed that sort of action on the towel. So it is good to see that it's getting a lot more attention this way. That was the whole idea, I guess, right? By placing it down the middle along with the feeding area. A couple other little scraps. This one obviously isn't getting as much attention, so maybe it is the fact that the food that went in along with the towel was just maybe placed right over the towel, and that the worms are just coming to it because of the collection of juices that came out of the foods. The foods that I feed are, kind of hear it, it's frozen, right? So the frozen foods are always going to kick off moisture as they thaw, and naturally continue to kick off moisture as they decompose. So it's very likely, I don't know, I was just kicking my ideas around. I never know if what I'm saying is true or not. They're usually based on my observations, and they sort of try to make sense. So here's another chunk of towel, also pretty popular. Right away, it's, you could tell. I don't think it's just mature worms alongside baby worms. I think it is, various types of worms alongside each other. I think the I know that the red wigglers themselves are pretty small, as are the blue worms, and then the Euros that are also thought to be mixed in with this population are always going to be a little bit larger in size. So, how did we do that last time? Last time we just placed in the fresh food down low and then placed all the older stuff right on top of it. Why don't we follow a similar pattern here? Here I've got 1, 2, 3, right? So we'll try to evenly distribute what remains of these veggies into these 3 little paper containers. See if we can scrape out what remains in this one. Drop it into the last one. Although, I guess we did theorize that maybe having the towel beneath the fresh food would be beneficial. We're sort of robbing ourselves of that opportunity here by doing it this way. That's okay. No big deal. I guess what we could do is maybe take the towel, or at least as much of it as we can find, and just place that right on top of the food. Maybe by being right on top of the freshest food portions would be just as beneficial to it getting a whole bunch of worm traffic. Some of the chunks are pretty puny. I think I've got the majority of them at this point. I don't know, let's see, we'll take these pine cones, drop them in here alongside the freshly added food. Got a few other chunks of old bedding, old food. We'll plop that on top, but let's not forget to place in the coffee. We'll do away with what remains in this container here. I think we've got it all, or at least most of it. And let's see. Yeah, I think we're almost there. So pretty much a routine, somewhat run-of-the-mill. Oh yeah, let's not forget this stuff that we were going to just recycle at this point. Some recyclable type bedding material that used to be sort of my top covering, which is something I like to do. I like having a top covering. You always see how the worms are drawn to that and they like hanging out there. It's kind of fun to have a little bit of a welcoming party too when you open up the bin originally to start working on it. You've got a good number of worms just hanging out right there on the surface. So I like going with that, and I'm going to do that here as well. I wonder if I've got a piece of paper we could rest across the top here. Let's see what I could find. Is this all pretty level? I think it is. I am running a little bit low on newspaper. When I went to my mom's house yesterday for dinner, she provided me with some old toilet paper, tubes. While I was there, I probably should have checked her recycling to grab some newspaper too. That's usually where I get my newspaper from. But we're done here. Not much else to do than clean up and put things away, but I'm not going to waste your time with that because that's boring. Before I go though, let me just really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to leave me a thumbs up. That's always really appreciated. If you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. That's really appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.